Tristan Kane didn't believe in fate until he stepped into a stranger's backyard and laid eyes on the woman who would wreck every rule he lived by. He hadn't planned on attending the party. It was a last-minute detour, a favor for a friend who'd begged him to drop by and make an appearance at his cousin's birthday bash. Tristan had just landed back in New York after closing a multi-million-dollar property deal in Milan, and all he wanted was a hot shower and a cold drink. But when his friend, Luke, mentioned there'd be cake, free drinks, and zero press, Tristan figured 1 hour wouldn't kill him. He wore jeans and a fitted black shirt casual by his standards. His silver Aston Martin was parked discreetly down the street. No one at this party would know he was the youngest real estate mogul on the East Coast unless he told them. That was part of the appeal. As he stepped through the sliding glass door into the backyard filled with string lights, laughter, and the faint scent of barbecue, the crowd erupted into cheers. Surprise! A woman in the center of it all spun around, her hand flying to her mouth, eyes wide with shock. She was barefoot on the lawn in a soft pink sundress that skimmed her knees, her dark curls tied up messily like she hadn't expected to be the center of anything tonight. And Tristan forgot how to breathe. She was stunning. Not in the glossy, edited way women in his world were. She was real, radiant, and emotional, and completely unaware of the way she'd just pulled the ground out from under him. "Who is she?" Tristan asked, leaning toward Luke. Luke grinned. "That's my cousin, Celine Carter, the birthday girl." Celine, the name landed like a punch to the chest. She looked around, laughing nervously as people sang to her. Her cheeks flushed deep red, and when her eyes swept the crowd and briefly landed on his, there was a flicker of something between them, something electric. "Introduce me," Tristan said, already moving before Luke could answer. Celine was still recovering from the shock of the surprise when Tristan approached her. He didn't do small talk, but something about her made him want to try. "Happy birthday," he said, offering a crooked smile. She blinked up at him. "Thanks. Do I know you?" He held out a hand. "Tristan." "Friend of Luke's. He dragged me here with promises of cake." Her eyes narrowed playfully. "Well, cake is sacred. You better have earned it. I'm prepared to prove myself." She laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made people turn around, unapologetic, bright, honest. Tristan had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from him: investors, social climbers, models with the same practiced smile. But Celine didn't know who he was. She didn't care, and that made her dangerous. He stayed near her the rest of the evening. They talked over skewers and cupcakes. She told him she worked as a children's book illustrator, freelancing from a small studio apartment in Brooklyn. She just turned 28. Her dream was to one day publish her own series. Tristan told her he was in real estate and left it at that. She didn't ask about numbers or clients or billion-dollar properties. She asked about what he liked about it, what inspired him. No one had asked him that in years. They danced once, near the end of the night, with her barefoot and him laughing as she tugged him into the makeshift dance area on the patio. He didn't dance. He never danced, but he did with her. As the party thinned out and the stars came out, they found themselves sitting on the back steps, shoulder to shoulder, sipping from the same bottle of sparkling water. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. He turned to her. "What did you expect?" "I don't know." "Someone who talks about themselves too much, or flirts with every girl here. You're not that." He studied her face. "You're not what I expected either." She smiled at him, and it hit him hard. He didn't want the night to end, but it had to. "Do you want to go for a walk?" he asked, surprising himself. She hesitated. "It's almost midnight. I'll walk you right back here, promise." Something about the way he said it made her nod without a second thought. They walked down the quiet street, the summer air warm and still. She talked about her favorite children's books growing up, and he listened like every word mattered. When they came to a small park, she sat on the swing set, and he pushed her lightly, his hands brushing her back. They were laughing like they'd known each other forever when she suddenly turned serious. "I don't usually do this," she said. "Do what?" "Open up to strangers, but you don't feel like one." He stepped closer, his hand closing around the chain of her swing. "You don't either." She looked up at him, her breath catching, and that's when he kissed her. It wasn't planned, it wasn't smooth. But it was real, soft, slow, and then deeper, like they both knew something had shifted forever. When they broke apart, she was breathless. "What was that?" "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I'm not ready for it to end." She stared at him, eyes wide, heart pounding. "Me either." They walked back hand in hand. He left her at the door with a promise to see her again. As he got into his car, his phone buzzed with a message from his assistant confirming his morning meetings. He had deals waiting, properties to close, investors to call, but none of it felt as important anymore, not after meeting Celine. Not after realizing in the middle of a stranger's backyard that he might have just found the one thing money couldn't buy, the one woman who could steal his heart. Tristan waited 2 days before calling Luke. Not because he wanted to be mysterious, but because he hadn't stopped thinking about her since he left that backyard. He'd replayed every second of that night in his mind. The way her voice dipped when she talked about her art, the way her eyes lit up when he made her laugh, the way her lips tasted like cherries and midnight. "She's not seeing anyone, if that's what you're about to ask," Luke said the moment he answered. "And yes, she mentioned you, twice." "What did she say?" "That you were unexpected." That one word sat with him longer than it should have. By Thursday, Tristan had a plan. He called in a favor with his private chef and booked out a quiet gallery downtown for the evening, one that normally didn't open for events. A place filled with oversized storybook illustrations and whimsical sculptures made from recycled paper and wire. It was obscure, off the beaten path, and perfect. He didn't ask her out over the phone. Instead, he sent a single white envelope to her apartment. Inside, a ticket with her name printed in gold, the address of the gallery, and a time. No explanations, no branding. Just a handwritten note that read, "Say yes." At exactly 7, Celine stepped into the gallery wearing a soft gray coat, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked around slowly, unsure if she was early or if she'd misunderstood the entire thing. Then she saw him. He was standing beside a sculpture of a fox made entirely from torn book pages, a glass of water in his hand, watching her with a quiet intensity like he'd been waiting for her to walk into his world all along. "I wasn't sure this was real," she said, approaching slowly. "You didn't include your name." "I figured the mystery might be half the fun." She arched a brow. "Are you always this cryptic?" "Only when I'm trying to impress someone who makes a living drawing joy." That pulled a laugh from her that made his chest ease just slightly. They walked through the gallery, her eyes wide with wonder at every turn. The exhibits were playful, surreal, a child's imagination brought to life in 3 dimensions. At one point, she stopped in front of a wall-sized mural of a girl riding a whale across a night sky. "I used to dream like this," she murmured. "Used to." "Life has a way of shrinking dreams to fit reality," she said, not looking at him. "Rent, deadlines, grown-up things." He studied her profile, the curve of her jaw lit by soft gallery lights. "Maybe you need someone to remind you what dreaming feels like." She turned to him slowly. "And you think you're that someone?" "I'd like to try." He didn't touch her, didn't rush her. But the air between them thickened, charged with a question neither of them dared say aloud. After the gallery, he led her upstairs to a private dining space nestled above the exhibit. The room was small, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and a single table dressed in white linen and glass. Candles flickered along the edges, casting golden reflections across the polished floor. "You went all out," she said, eyes scanning the space. "I wasn't sure what you liked," he replied. "So I aimed for unforgettable." Dinner was quiet at first. Not awkward, but tentative, like 2 people stepping into unfamiliar terrain with no map. She ate slowly, asking questions about his upbringing, his travels, the strangest place he'd ever fallen asleep. He told her about a rooftop in Marrakesh, a stormy night in Tokyo, a train in Austria. When she asked about his parents, he paused. "My father passed when I was 19, he said. Heart attack, too much pressure, too many secrets, my mother, she left long before that. Celine reached for her glass, her gaze steady. That sounds lonely. It was, he said simply. But it taught me two things: how to survive with nothing and how to recognize something real when it shows up. She didn't look away. And what do you see right now? He leaned forward, elbows resting on the table. I see a woman who doesn't know how extraordinary she is. Who thinks dreaming is a luxury instead of a necessity. Who doesn't realize she walked into my life and flipped everything upside down. Her breath caught, but she didn't speak. I should warn you, he added. I don't do casual, not anymore. Celine sat back, the candlelight dancing in her eyes. Then what are you hoping for? He considered her for a long moment. Something I can't walk away from, something worth staying up at night for. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was electric. After dinner, he walked her outside. The city was quiet, the air crisp. He didn't offer a ride. He didn't need to. I still don't know what you really do, she said as they stood near the curb. I help people find homes, he answered. Places they can grow into. She tilted her head. That's a nice way to put it. I thought so too. She hesitated, then reached up and touched the lapel of his coat lightly. Tonight was unexpected. Not a bad thing, I hope, she shook her head. Not bad at all. He leaned down slowly, giving her enough time to pull away if she wanted to. She didn't. Their kiss was softer this time, but no less charged. When they stepped apart, her expression was unreadable. Good night, Celine. She lingered for a moment, then turned and walked away. He stood there until she disappeared around the corner. He'd meant what he said. He didn't do casual. Not anymore. And something about her, about the way she looked at the world, told him this had the potential to be the one thing in his life he couldn't control. And for the first time in years, he didn't want to. Tristan didn't let weeks pass. That wasn't who he was. When he wanted something, he pursued it with precision. And right now, he wanted her not in the way he'd wanted deals or victories or admiration, but in a way that made every second apart feel like a mistake. Celine had agreed to meet him in Prospect Park on a Saturday afternoon. It was her suggestion. Someplace outside, she'd said. Someplace normal. He'd laughed, but agreed. When she arrived, she brought a sketchpad tucked under her arm and a coffee the size of her face. You don't drink coffee, he said, eyeing it. I do when I stayed up until 3 finishing a commission, she replied. You're lucky I didn't show up with 2. He gestured to the bench near the lake and they sat down. A mother nearby was blowing bubbles for her toddler. Ducks floated past without urgency. I was thinking about what you said, she began. He waited, about not wanting something casual. She glanced at him. That's not a small thing. I don't say things to get a reaction, Celine. I meant it. I know. That's what makes it harder. He turned slightly, his arm resting along the back of the bench. Harder how? I don't do fast. Not with real things. I've done the whole crash and burn before. It doesn't end well. I like who I am when I'm alone. And I don't want to lose that just because someone makes my heart do backflips. He considered that. So let's not crash, let's build, she blinked. That's your answer? Yes, I don't want to rush you, I just want to keep seeing you. Keep knowing you. She looked at him for a long moment, then let out a breath. I can work with that, he smiled, and the tension between them shifted, less uncertainty, more anticipation. As the afternoon passed, they wandered through the park. She sketched a carousel horse while he leaned against a railing and watched her in silence, the wind tugging at her curls. He never interrupted her while she drew. There was reverence in the way she worked, like she was coaxing the image out of the paper through sheer will. People always think drawing is just talent, she said without looking up, but it's 90% patience and stubbornness. I know something about that, he said. She glanced at him. What stubbornness? I've built things from the ground up, not because I was the smartest, but because I refused to quit. She tore the page from her sketchpad and handed it to him. The drawing was quick, imperfect, but alive. The carousel horse leaned forward mid-motion, its reins fluttering behind it. Keep it, she said. It's not finished, but you look like someone who doesn't need perfect. He studied the lines, the movement. It's better than perfect. Later that week, she brought him to a street fair in Bushwick. They shared fried dumplings, browsed vinyl records, and watched a man juggle flaming torches while standing on a crate. He paid for everything without hesitation, but never made a show of it. He didn't care about the cost. He cared about the way she lit up when she found a used copy of a book she'd loved as a kid. "Don't laugh," she warned, holding it up. "The Girl Who Tamed the Wind," he read aloud. "Why would I laugh? Because it's technically for ages 7 and under." He tilted his head. "So is Ice Cream. Still a classic." She tucked the book into her tote bag, her eyes shining. One evening, he invited her to his place. Not the penthouse in Tribeca where he hosted business dinners. That space was too cold, too curated. No, he brought her to the loft he kept above a bookstore in Soho. It was quieter there, filled with natural light and shelves lined with rare first editions. She stepped inside and turned in a slow circle. "This looks nothing like I imagined," he raised an eyebrow. "What did you imagine?" "Glass everything. Marble countertops. A fridge that talks. This one just keeps things cold," he said, "and the countertops came with the building." She wandered over to a framed print on the wall. "You read Faulkner?" "I collect first editions. Doesn't always mean I enjoy them." She turned, grinning. "So you're a snob, but a self-aware one. That's the goal." He cooked her dinner. Nothing fancy: pan-seared salmon, roasted vegetables, and a bottle of wine older than either of them. As they ate at the small table near the window, she traced the stem of her glass and said, "You're different in here." "How so?" "Less armor, more you." He didn't respond right away. Then he said, "This is the only place I don't have to be anything." She nodded slowly. "I like this version." The next morning, she called in late to a meeting and watched him work from the couch. He perched over his laptop, sleeves rolled to the elbows, reading blueprints on a touchscreen with a focus that made her stomach flutter. When he noticed her watching, he said, "You're distracting." "Then let me help." She got up, padded over barefoot, and leaned over his shoulder. He looked up at her. "Unless you know a better zoning regulation for mixed-use developments in Tribeca, I'm not sure how." She grinned. "I know the color you should paint that lobby." He glanced back at the screen. "It's a commercial building, and people still have eyes." He laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that didn't sound practiced. She kissed his temple and returned to the couch. Later that day, she received a message from her landlord. The building was being sold. Her lease wouldn't be renewed. She had 60 days. When she told Tristan, he didn't react the way she expected. "You're not moving into a corporate shoebox," he said. "I won't let that happen." "I wasn't asking for help, I know, but you have it anyway." She stood in his loft, arms crossed. "Don't try to fix everything." "I'm not trying to fix it, I'm trying to offer something better." She looked at him, eyes narrowed. "Like what?" "Like a space you can actually create in. No upstairs neighbor who plays the drums. Real light, real room." "You mean in one of your properties?" "Yes." "So you want to be my landlord now?" "No, I want to be the person who makes your life easier, not harder." She didn't answer. Not right away. When she finally spoke, it was quiet. "I need to feel like I can stand on my own." He stepped closer. "You already do, but sometimes standing together is stronger." She met his gaze. "Let me think about it," he nodded. Outside, the city buzzed with the rhythm of 1,000 people trying to outrun time. Inside, they stood facing each other, neither moving. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, it was full of things they weren't ready to say yet, but they were close. Closer than either of them had expected to be so soon, and neither was pulling away. The first flakes of snow were falling by the time Tristan stepped out of the car and looked up at the building. It wasn't flashy, no mirrored glass or towering signage. Just clean lines, tall windows, and a slate-gray exterior that stood out quietly on a quiet street in Fort Greene. The kind of place most people wouldn't even notice, except it had everything Celine had ever wanted. Inside, the loft was flooded with natural light. The ceilings were high, the walls whitewashed brick, and the floors a warm, honeyed wood. It had a built-in drafting table beneath a bank of windows, shelves that reached the ceiling, and a small alcove that could be turned into a reading nook. But Tristan wasn't looking at the space. He was watching her. Celine moved slowly, taking everything in with a kind of reverence. Her gloves were clutched in one hand, the other trailing along the edge of the window frame. She didn't say anything, not at first. "I'm not trying to buy you," Tristan said quietly. "I just want to give you room to breathe." She turned around. "It's not the offer, it's what it means." "What does it mean to you?" "That you see me," she said, "and that's scarier than anything else." He stepped forward. "Why?" "Because if someone sees you, they can break you." His voice didn't waver. "Then I'll make sure I never do." She looked away, jaw tightening. "I've spent a long time being careful, making sure I didn't lean too hard on anyone, that I didn't expect too much." "You didn't ask for this." "I know that, but I'm not offering it to fix your life. I'm offering it because I want to be part of it." He crossed the room slowly, stopping just close enough to reach her hand. "I don't want to be someone you have to protect yourself from." Her fingers curled around his without hesitation. "Then don't disappear." "I won't." They stood there, the only sound the hush of snow against the window panes. Later that week, she signed the lease. She insisted on paying, and he didn't argue. He'd made the gesture. She'd accepted it on her terms. The day she moved in, he showed up with a hammer, a bottle of wine, and a box of her favorite pencils, ones she'd mentioned once, in passing, weeks ago. "You remembered," she said, holding them like they were made of gold. "I remember everything," he said. "Especially the things that matter." They built the shelves together. He read the instructions while she held the board steady. They argued about where the couch should go. She won. Around midnight, with boxes still unopened and the kitchen still bare, she curled up beside him on the floor, wrapped in a throw blanket and the scent of spiced candles. "You feel real now," she whispered. He looked down at her. "What do you mean, all of this? You, us?" "It feels like something I don't have to question." "You don't," he said. "Not anymore." 2 weeks later, Tristan invited her to a charity gala. She hesitated. Ballrooms weren't her world, but he didn't pressure her. "I'd like you there," was all he said, so she went. The hotel was a marble cathedral lit by chandeliers the size of cars. She wore a deep plum dress with no embellishments, her hair swept into a soft chignon. When she walked into the room at his side, conversation slowed. People turned, but she didn't shrink. Tristan kept his hand at the small of her back, steadying. A woman in a sequined gown approached them near the bar. "Tristan Kane, vanishing act of the year, and who's this?" Before he could answer, Celine extended her hand. "Celine Carter, illustrator." And apparently distraction. The woman blinked, then laughed. "Well played." Tristan leaned in once the woman had walked away. "You're dangerous in heels." "I'm dangerous in flats too," she murmured. They danced once slow, close, her cheek against his chest. He wasn't a man who let himself be vulnerable in public. But with Celine, it didn't feel like exposure. It felt like clarity. As they swayed, she whispered, "You're different than I thought you'd be." "How so?" "Less cold, more heart." He didn't say anything, just held her tighter. That night, as they stepped out into the cold, snow swirling around them in soft spirals, she stopped on the steps of the hotel. "I want to tell you something," she said. He turned toward her. "Anything. When I first met you, I thought you were just passing through my life. One of those stories you tell later, but somewhere along the way you became something I didn't want to end." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. A small, flat box wrapped in deep navy paper. She blinked. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a key, not flashy, no diamonds. Just a silver key etched with her initials. Her breath caught. "What is this?" "It's not to my place," he said. "It's to yours, the new one. I had it engraved because I want you to know this isn't temporary. You belong there, you belong with me." She stared at it, her fingers trembling. "I'm not asking for everything today," he added. "But I'm all in, Celine. Whatever this becomes, I'm here for it." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "You have no idea what this means." "Then show me." She stepped into him, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him under the falling snow. Not soft, not hesitant, but full. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered, "You stole my heart the night you walked into that backyard." He smiled. "And you've had mine ever since." They left hand in hand, the city quiet around them, the sky full of snow and promise. By spring, they'd painted the loft together. By summer, she'd finished her first children's book and he'd framed the cover in his office. And by winter again, he asked her to marry him not with a rooftop proposal or a rented orchestra, but in the middle of her studio, while she was barefoot and laughing, her hands stained with ink. She said yes without hesitation, because some love stories don't need to be loud. They just need to be true. Celine didn't know what would happen when her book launched. There had been no high-powered marketing team, no press tour, no national rollout, just a small, independent release with a Brooklyn-based publisher who loved her story the way she did. She'd illustrated every page by hand, every line and color chosen with the same care she'd once used to build walls around her heart. But now, her walls were gone, and her life looked nothing like it had a year ago. Tristan had helped host the launch party in the back of the same bookstore where they'd shared so many quiet mornings. The shop was strung with soft lights, illustrations from her book framed on the walls, and kids in oversized coats sitting cross-legged on the floor with sticky fingers and wide eyes. It was everything she'd dreamed of, and nothing she could have predicted. She stood near the register, signing copies with her name in looping ink when Tristan leaned in close. "You know, the little girl in the red sweater just told me your book made her want to fly a whale to school." Celine laughed and glanced over. "That's perfect." "That's exactly what it's for." She also asked if you live in a tower made of books. "Well, now I have to." He pulled a clean copy from behind his back. "Sign this one for me." She narrowed her eyes. "You already have 3. Not one with a personal message." She took the book, opened it, and wrote without hesitation, then handed it back. He looked down at the inscription. "To the man who reminded me how to dream, love always, see?" He ran his thumb over the words. "You do realize I'm framing this, right? Only if you put it in the office with all the serious art." "Done." That night, after the bookstore had emptied and the quiet had settled in, they returned to the loft. The space felt different now, more lived in, warmer. The walls had changed color. Plants filled the windowsills. Her art supplies were no longer confined to drawers. And in the corner, a small stack of framed photos had started to grow. The 2 of them at the street fair, her laughing on the swing in Prospect Park, him asleep on the couch with one of her paint-streaked aprons covering his chest. They sat on the floor, backs against the couch, her feet in his lap. Outside, the wind picked up. "I don't think I ever said thank you," she said, her voice quiet. "For what?" "For not giving up when I made it hard." "You didn't make it hard," he said. "You made it real." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "I used to think love was supposed to be messy, that it had to hurt or else it wasn't deep enough. And now I know it can be calm, steady, safe. And still be the most powerful thing I've ever felt." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. "Wait," she said, sitting up straighter. "Is that—" "Don't panic," he said. "It's not what you think." Inside the box was a gold pendant, delicate and simple. When she took it out, she saw that it was shaped like a tiny open book, and on the inside, engraved in miniature cursive, were the words, "Home is wherever you are." She blinked fast. He cleared his throat. "I was going to give it to you after the party, but you looked so happy, I didn't want to ruin your eyeliner." She cupped the pendant in her hand. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me." He brushed a curl from her cheek. "You've given me more than I'll ever be able to return." "I don't want returns," she whispered. "I just want forever." He stood and pulled her to her feet. "Then let's build it." Together. They danced slowly in the living room, no music, no pretense, just the rhythm of 2 hearts finding their way in step. By summer, they were married in the garden behind the bookstore, surrounded by wildflowers and paper lanterns. Luke officiated, making everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. Celine wore a dress she'd designed herself. Soft, flowing, the color of antique parchment. He wore a navy suit and a look on his face that made it clear he never wanted to look away from her. They exchanged vows beneath an arch made of old picture frames and twisted ivy. Hers were handwritten, full of color and story. His were quiet and steady, a promise spoken with the weight of truth. Afterward, they didn't throw a grand reception. Instead, they invited everyone back to the loft, where there was pizza, champagne, and a playlist that included everything from jazz to 80s ballads. It was imperfect and loud and exactly right. That night, when the last guest had left and the city had gone to sleep, they stood on the rooftop wrapped in a blanket, the skyline glowing behind them. "Do you ever think about the night we met?" he asked. She nodded. "All the time. I almost didn't go," she leaned into him. "I almost didn't stay. That would have been the worst mistake of my life." She tilted her head up. "But we didn't make it." "No," he said. "We didn't." Years passed, but the way they looked at each other never changed. She published more books, each one more daring than the last. He expanded his company, but never lost sight of what mattered. They traveled, built a tiny writing studio in the countryside, and adopted a golden retriever named Doodle who chewed through half her sketchbooks and all of his socks. And every year, on the anniversary of the night they met, he gave her a single envelope. Inside, a ticket to something unexpected, a gallery, a concert, a cabin in the woods, and always, always a note that simply said, "Say yes." She always did.